Welcome to Public Enemy Number 1, The Police Whistleblower. This is episode 2 of season 2, and it's taken me some time to get this together because I've been digesting the recent court decision, and I was waiting for the updated legal figure from the police service. I had said that I was going to focus on general issues in season 2, but for this episode, I'm going to focus entirely on the recent court decision. And I'm not going to go back and rehash everything that led up to it, but I will give you a very brief chronology up until the point of attending divisional court in November of 2023. So in season 1, you heard all about my journey to date. So as you already heard, I resigned from the Waterloo Regional Police Service in June of 2017. And at that time, I very carefully negotiated my resignation to ensure that when I left, I would be able to speak about my experiences and advocate for protections for police whistleblowers. It didn't take long before the police service started to take actions that I was alleging were violations of our legal contract. In December of 2017, I alleged that I was involved in the police service's defense of the $167 million class action lawsuit that had been filed against it on behalf of its current and former female officers. 1 month later, the police service filed an appeal of my WSIB claim, which at the time was only paying for my psychological care and medication for my PTSD that resulted from my employment. Now, they did both of these things only about 4 weeks apart, but I didn't know about the WSIB appeal until August of 2018. So in the meantime, I filed a civil claim against the police service and Brian Larkin for breach of contract in May of 2018. In response to that, 51 days later, the police service brought a case against me at the Human Rights Tribunal, alleging that every public statement I make that's related to my employment with them is a breach of our resignation agreement. It was at that point that things got exponentially more complicated and confusing. I filed as many documents as I could with the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario to try to get them to understand that there was no merit to the police service's case and that it should be dismissed preliminarily. It was only after the Human Rights Tribunal indicated that they were going to proceed with the police service's case to a full hearing that I filed my own application at the Human Rights Tribunal to be heard at the same time. Now, this all happened before I found out about the second allegation of breach, which was the WSIB appeal. So when I did find out about the WSIB appeal, I had to file to amend both my civil claim and my human rights application. So beyond the summer of 2018, I feel as though I've done everything in my power to have the police service's case dismissed for several reasons. In the fall of 2018, I attended Superior Court and I filed an anti-SLAPP motion to try to have their case dismissed as I believed it was a lawsuit limiting public participation on matters of public interest. Because the court decided that they did not have jurisdiction to dismiss a tribunal matter, that didn't help me at all. I won't go into the details of my civil case here. I'm just going to highlight what's gone on at the HRTO. So from 2019 until today, I have done everything in my power to be heard at the Human Rights Tribunal. At one point, I did allege that my previous adjudicator was applying the tribunal's rules in favor of the police service and not listening to my requests to dismiss their claim against me. Because I made this allegation, in 2019, the tribunal released an interim decision that threatened to take away my right to even defend myself against the police service because I had alleged that the adjudicator violated their code of conduct. Because I had pointed that out to her, she also determined in 2019 that the tribunal would only be proceeding on 4 specific preliminary matters, and she refused to include my request to dismiss the police service's case in that list of 4 preliminary matters. So that meant that in 2022, when the tribunal resumed our case, they did only proceed with those 4 items identified by the previous adjudicator against whom I had made allegations of violations of their code of conduct. So all of this is to say that, yes, I was still alleging in 2022 that the tribunal had breached procedural fairness by not hearing my request to dismiss the police services case. So when the tribunal decided in November of 2022 to dismiss my first allegation of contravention of settlement against the police service, but allow the second allegation, while still not addressing any of my 7 requests to dismiss their case, I filed to appeal that decision by way of application for judicial review. So the judicial review hearing was heard on November 22nd, 2023, a year after receiving the Human Rights Tribunal decision. I'm pretty sure I could have traveled around the world faster than the Human Rights Tribunal is going to deal with our cases, but that's besides the point. For those of you who observed that hearing on November 22nd, 2023, you'll know all of the arguments I presented. I spoke about how the 2 allegations of contravention of settlement that I had alleged against the police service formed a series of incidents. There is a ton of case law before the Human Rights Tribunal that talks about complaints alleging discrimination or harassment, and it classifies what has to be in common for those allegations to be considered a series of incidents. However, there is no case law that specifically addresses what it takes for a contravention of settlement application to form a series of allegations. I spoke in depth and referenced case law to prove that I believed merely breaching the agreement creates an incident. And for those incidents to create a series, they must only be a violation of the legal agreement. I spoke about how if the same term of the agreement was repeatedly breached, that would simply be the continuing effects of one incident. And based on case law, that would negate the fact that it formed a series because it would just be the same thing continuing to happen with no adverse effects on the continuing incidents. I also spoke in great detail about all 7 requests that I made to the Human Rights Tribunal. Some were in writing and some were oral. But based on the tribunal's own rules, once a Form 10 is filed, which I did in April of 2020, the tribunal has to determine how it's going to hear that request for order. Yet in my case, even in 2022, when the tribunal held a preliminary hearing, they still chose not to decide how to hear my multiple requests to dismiss the police services case. The tribunal has and still is alleging that my objections are substantive, and they have to wait until a full hearing on the merits. But there's a whole slew of case law at the Human Rights Tribunal for cases just like mine. There's a case I referenced at the hearing, Riopel versus Foster. And in that case, it's exactly like what I'm facing. A legal agreement had been signed upon the conclusion of an original human rights complaint. And then down the road, one of the parties alleged that 2 of the other parties had breached the agreement. It says right in there that by going around through the community and repeating the allegations that were contained in the original application, this party believed that the other 2 parties were violating the agreement. Within the first year of that application, the tribunal dealt with the preliminary objection that there was nothing in the agreement prohibiting the 2 parties from discussing the allegations that led to the original complaint. That's exactly what the Waterloo Regional Police Service has alleged in my case. They're alleging that when I go around and speak about the allegations that led to the original complaint, I'm violating the agreement. But just like in Riopel, there is nothing in my agreement that prevents me from going around and speaking about the allegations that led to the original complaint. I'm giving you this much detail just so that when you look at this final decision, you'll understand my frustration. The decision came out 9 days after the court appearance, which in most cases is almost unheard of at the divisional court. And one might expect that by now I would come to expect a negative outcome, but I can tell you that I was actually very surprised when I got this decision. This is because of some of the issues I identified in Season 1 in Episode 7. If you recall, I had a theory that when I present before female judges, I'm heard and my arguments are adequately represented in their reasons. I also identified in that episode that it may just be the fact that I'm a self-represented litigant that I am at times marginalized when I present in court. Well, I had my answer now. On November 22nd, 2023, I spoke before 3 female judges, and I was optimistic that my arguments would be heard in detail, summarized in the reasons, and given adequate consideration. When I read this decision, I really didn't get that impression. When I started reading it, it was clear right from the very beginning that I had lost on every one of my arguments. The Divisional Court had sided with the Human Rights Tribunal on every issue and deferred to their expertise in managing their own procedures. I knew that with most applications for judicial review, this is what happens. But I really felt like when I laid it all out for these 3 judges and the timeline that was followed, all the requests I had made to have the police services case dismissed while the tribunal proceeded with requests made by the police service, that they would see that I was denied procedural fairness. But I was wrong. I've posted the decision to my website, police-whistleblower.ca. And if you haven't been there yet, it's literally just police-whistleblower.ca. You'll have to go to the year 2023 to see the results at the very bottom of the page. I've already said a few times throughout this podcast that I'm not afraid to lose. I don't mind losing. I just want to lose with dignity. I want to be able to see that the arguments I made were given adequate consideration, and yet they didn't meet the test for success. You all know that I'm not a lawyer, and I don't try to hold myself out to have the same level of knowledge and expertise as a lawyer would. But when I'm putting my best arguments forward, and I don't even feel as if they were given any consideration, how can I feel as if I've been given access to justice? And please don't lose sight of the fact that throughout this entire ordeal, dating back to 2016, I guess arguably you could say dating back to 2011, I've been living with the effects of PTSD. I'm still seeking treatment for my PTSD. There was a time that I thought I may not ever need psychological treatment or medication again for my PTSD, and that would have been in the fall of 2017 after I resigned from the Waterloo Regional Police Service, but it didn't take long after that for their actions to aggravate my symptoms and largely set me back. So if it must be said, everything I have done up until now has been excruciatingly painful and difficult. This is not the place for me to go into detail about my physical or mental or psychological health. But if you know anything about PTSD, and specifically PTSD in first responders, which includes a whole host of traumas such as institutional betrayal, moral trauma, intrusive thoughts, and suicidal ideation, you would know that being forced to take time away from my life to prepare legal documents, represent myself in legal forums, it has not been an easy task. But as I've been saying all along, what choice did I have? What would my life or my family's life look like if I hadn't had the ability to defend myself against the police services case? There's absolutely no way I could have afforded legal representation for the past 7 years. And now that we're on the topic of cost, I did obtain the updated legal figure that the police service has spent on their lawyer throughout these matters. If you've been following any of the media coverage of Freedom of Information requests, you'll know that they're not easy to obtain. So when I first obtained this legal decision, I knew that I didn't really want to put it out there publicly until I had the updated figure. So I made a request to the Waterloo Regional Police Service for the updated legal figure. And they did send me some invoices before the holiday break. But they had left out the most important invoices. They had left out the invoices for the summer of 2023 when they would have had to produce all of their documentation for the application for judicial review. So I thought that was strange because that would have taken a significant amount of work. They also left out the invoice for November when 2 lawyers appeared in court for an entire day. So this is why you're only getting this podcast episode in 2024, because I have now updated the legal figure. The missing invoices were produced, And as I had suspected, they were much larger than the ones that were provided to me in 2023. For instance, in the month of November alone, they spent over $30,000 on their legal counsel. So from the date that I first came forward in 2016 with internal concerns, the police service has spent $708,930.70 on legal fees in my matters alone. Is it becoming more clear why I believe Canada needs to protect police whistleblowers? If we had whistleblower protection laws in Canada, this would not be happening. That $700,000 would still be at the Waterloo Regional Police Service to be spent on public safety initiatives. Every year they beg for more money, but nobody is asking why they're spending the money that they are spending. If Ontario had adequate and effective oversight bodies, none of this would be happening. I have repeatedly taken complaints to Ontario's oversight bodies, and they have repeatedly turned me down. So here we are, 7 years after my resignation, and $700,000 of public funds have been spent just to what? To try to silence me? I really can't make any more sense of it than that. And the funny thing is, if you're following along with my journey, you'll know that my goal has only ever been to use my experience to encourage corporations and government to enact whistleblower laws or create whistleblower policies to protect their people from retaliation after filing a complaint. I am not and never was on a defamation campaign against the Waterloo Regional Police Service. And even if they alleged that I was defaming them, then why would they not have brought a case against me for defamation? As much as governments in recent years and even recent days have taken actions to suppress freedom of expression and freedom of the press, I do feel as if we are at a pivotal moment in history. And I say this because I think historically, the element of fear has successfully kept people silent when they have been oppressed or abused. But I do think there's a shift towards people finding empowerment and speaking out against this oppression and abuse. Those with the moral courage might be few and far between, but we are inspiring the next generation to stand up for themselves. And if you're someone in a position of leadership that's scared by that fact, then maybe it's time you take a good look at yourself in the mirror and give yourself an ethics checkup. If you are someone in a position of authority and you have done things so egregious that you would spend close to $750,000 to try to have that conduct covered up and never spoken about, then I would suggest you're someone that doesn't deserve a position of authority, especially for a public agency. But that's only my opinion. As I usually do, I've gotten off topic. So let's return to the recent court decision. Now, where does this leave me? Well, it leaves me exactly where I was in November of 2022, but we've wasted a lot more time. So I'm exactly where I was then. One of my 2 allegations has been dismissed, and I can only proceed with the WSIB appeal in my claim before the Human Rights Tribunal. Now, don't forget that my lawsuit has been stayed in civil court. So upon the completion of this HRTO case, I would have the right to apply to reopen my case before the Superior Court and proceed with any outstanding claims against the police service and Larkin. Now, it'll be up to me if I choose to do that, say 8 or 10 years after the fact, but it is an option available to me. And because they rejected my claims that I'd been denied procedural fairness, I'm back to waiting for the Human Rights Tribunal to schedule a hearing on the merits of the police services case. Now, remember, they filed their case in 2018. So this coming June will be 6 years after the date that they filed it. And I've been alleging since day one that there is no legal basis for their claim. I've already submitted extensive evidence to the Human Rights Tribunal to prove this, but we're still in a waiting pattern. I know what this looks like, and I know how bad it looks. The police service has spent over $700,000 on legal fees in my matters. It looks like I'm the one causing these frivolous expenses. But you have to remember, since July 10th of 2018, I've been asking the tribunal to dismiss their case. Now, I think everyone can agree that there must be some merit to the allegations I've made against them, because I've now been to the Court of Appeal twice, and I've had several hearings at the Human Rights Tribunal, and although they managed to dismiss one of my 2 allegations, I still have one outstanding breach of contract allegation against the police service. So let's backtrack to 2018. I filed my lawsuit for $200,000 in 2018. I think it's pretty clear at this point that you can say my allegation of breach relating to the WSIB appeal has quite a few teeth. It has withstood the scrutiny of the Superior Court, the Court of Appeal, and now the Human Rights Tribunal. And here we are 6 years after me filing it in the first place. So in a typical litigation scenario, would this not be a time that parties might be discussing a settlement? Because if my initial claim was for $200,000 and they've already spent $700,000, is that responsible litigation? As I've said, I've now made 7 attempts to stop their case and prevent the further expense of public funds, but I haven't been heard. I also filed a complaint to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission for misuse of public funds relating to my case. But they dismissed my complaint, and I'm in the process of trying to obtain the investigative file. But I challenge anyone out there to explain to me how this is not a matter of public interest. Canada is one of the last countries to enact robust and effective whistleblower protection laws. I talked all about this in episode 1 of season 2. But now you're seeing in real time, in my case, the consequences of not having adequate laws. By conducting themselves the way they are, the Waterloo Regional Police Service and former Chief Brian Larkin have ensured that any other police officer who sees something on the job internally, believes it's a violation of law or ethics, does not ever speak about it. If they do, like me, they will become public enemy number 1. Thank you for staying with me up until this point, and I do promise to get to those general topics I said I would get to in season 2, but I appreciate your patience. If you haven't yet done so, please sign up for my mailing list at policeversuswhistleblower.ca to be kept up to date of all future court appearances. My next court appearance will be on February 7th, 2024, in just a few weeks, when I take on the Waterloo Regional Police Association in a duty of fair representation hearing. As you know, throughout all of these proceedings, it's been said that this matter should go before a labor arbitrator. Despite this, my association has denied every request I have made for a grievance. At this hearing, I'll be outlining all of those requests and how, at this point in time, I feel it is their duty to offer me representation and alleviate some of this burden I've been facing for the past 7 years. This hearing will be open to the public, and I'll be disseminating information on how to obtain the virtual link through my mailing list. I'd like to personally thank each and every one of you who are supporting me along this journey, because there have been several very dark moments in my life over the past 7 years, and it's in part due to your support that I keep moving forward. I'm a firm believer that nothing will change unless we speak out about the problems and work towards a solution. So thank you for helping me spread this message. See you next time.